Sobrang nakakagulat na balita. Grabe, Senate President Francis Escudero inutusan na. Nagulat si Vice President Sara Duterte, simula na ng impeachment. Ayon sa nakalap nating impormasyon, Nayanig di umano ang Senado. Matapos si SP Escudero mag-isa, kinuwestiyon ng desisyon niyang pabago-bago, di umano ang impeachment makapag-umpisa. Dinedelay niya ang Senado. Grabe, si Senate President Francis Escudero inutusan na. Nagulat si Vice President Sara Duterte, simula na ng impeachment. Tara panoorin natin.
Mr. President, I've taken too much time of this body. I would relish interpolating the good minority leader even for 5 hours on this topic alone. But again, Mr. President, siguro mahabang-mahaba na po ito. I stick again to my previous manifestation that if we will not be able to conclude whether acquittal or conviction, the present impeachment case against Vice President Sara Duterte before the lapse of the 19th Congress, the same is functionally dismissed or deemed de facto dismissed, Mr. President. Yun lamang po, Mr. President, at ako po ay nagpapasalamat sa ating minority leader.
Thank you, Senator Tolentino. Briefly, Senator Pimentel.
Mr. President, while I still have the floor.
With the permission of the Honorable Pimentel, the gentleman may proceed.
Mr. President, kanina po narinig ko yung historical antecedents ng binanggit, Your Honor, Senator Pimentel. Would the good gentleman agree that the reason why the position of constitutionalists, textualists for that matter, on this issue is that the Constitution is silent as to the word carry over, crossover, continue. Meron po ba nakalagay sa Constitution, sa Saligang Batas ng Pilipinas, 1935, 1973, 1987 na carry over?
Mr. President, I will respond directly to the question. Wala pong nakasulat doon that it shall carry over, pero binanggit ko sa aking manifestation, wala talaga rin nakasulat doon that it cannot cross over. So, in effect, let us say textually, both positions are not even mentioned or entertained in the Constitution.
Mr. President, sangayon po kaya ang ating ginagalang na minority leader na kaya dahil walang carry over notion ay dahil malaki po ang pagkakaiba. There's a big difference between the 1987 Constitution and the 1935 Constitution, which was patterned after the United States Constitution. And I would like to have this placed on the records, Mr. President. Sa US Constitution, 100 po ang senador. At nag-i-eleksyon po every 2 years ng 33 senators. Ang naiiwan pong senador sa Estados Unidos pag nag-i-eleksyon ay 67. Because 67 plus 33 is 100. 67 is sufficient to comply with the provision of the US Constitution to convict in an impeachment case. Dahil 2/3 po yun ay 66. May sobra pang isa. Sa atin pong saligang batas noong 1935, kung inyo pong susuriin, ang atin pong senador na bumubuo rin ng impeachment court ay 24. Subalit, Mr. President, in the 1935 Constitution, ang eleksyon po natin ay 8, 8, 8. Tuwing mag-i-eleksyon ng senador, ang i-elect na senador kasama sa mga kongresista ay 8 senador lamang. Ang may iwan po ay 16. And 16 is 2/3. Enough to have a quorum as well as to convict or to acquit. In our present constitutional scheme, 1987 Constitution, we also have 24 senators, but we conduct elections every 3 years for 12 senators. Meaning to say, Mr. President, yung may iiwang kalahati na 12 is not sufficient to constitute a quorum, dahil 12, dapat 13, much more convict. Because to convict, you need 16 senators, Mr. President. Is it now the proposition of the good minority leader that the constitutional spirit as enshrined in the 1935 Constitution, the same as the spirit prevailing, although it is not as admitted by the good minority leader, textually enshrined, the same as the 1935? Ibig sabihin po ba yung 12 ay may quorum? Yung 12 ay may pwedeng maging 2/3 to allow your notion that we can carry over at yung mga yung sikat nga yung salita maitawid. Tama po ba yun, Mr. President?
Ako, Mr. President, yung 2/3 kasi is actually that was probably just the decision of the framers of the Constitution. They could have made it 1+1. They could have made it 3/4. So it's maybe by accident that 2/3 is equal to 8 + 8 is 16 is 2/3, so 24. But I do not think that was really the point, Mr. President. But at any rate, we have to live with the 1987 Constitution. So we look at the 1987 Constitution. And looking at the 1987 Constitution, the Senate is the impeachment court, not because it is the Senate created under Article 6, because it was recognized to be the court under Article 11. The framers could have chosen another body to be the court. That is theoretically possible. But it chose the Senate, not as a legislative body, but as a part of Congress, but not as a legislative body. So, yun po yung aking pagkaintindi. We have to live with the 1987 Constitution. We copied generally the idea siguro sa United States, but let's not be so beholden to their practices and rulings kasi iba na rin po, iba talaga ang sitwasyon natin. And I think textually speaking, my position is supported that although we keep on saying Senate, but this is not Senate as the other half of Congress, but this is the Senate chosen under Article 11 to be the impeachment court. So iba po ito. And then may paragraph 8 doon, sinabi, Congress shall also issue the rules to give life to the accountability of public officers. So, and we have done that. So, kaya ang aking stand actually is the Senate as an institution is the impeachment court. So the member judges can change. But just like as a division of the Supreme Court, division of the Sandigan Bayan and the CA, if they change their members, yung docket nila or caseload nila, tuloy pa rin. They have to decide the cases and bring the cases to their logical conclusion. So that is my simplified position, Mr. President.
So one last question, Mr. President, if the good gentleman would accede. Ang ibig sabihin po nito, Mr. President, is that the Senate now, under the 19th Congress, is empowered, is authorized to confer a jurisdiction to another Senate, which would be forthcoming, the Senate of the 20th Congress. So, allowed po ba tayo under the Constitution to transfer pending business or should it follow likewise, using your logic, the traditional norm of having it refiled and reset starting from zero? Similar to the bills.
Yes, yun na nga.
So, ibig ko sabihin, Mr. President, what would prevent the 19th Congress from passing on the impeachment case, not just to the 20th Congress, but to the 21st Congress? And I implore the good minority leader that all the provisions mentioned a while ago, which are correct, should likewise be read together with the constitutional provision that there should be only one impeachment case filed per year against the same respondent, Mr. President.
Alam nyo ba, Mr. President, na yung rule na yung legislative workload natin ay magre-reset kada pag may bagong kongreso? Alam nyo ba na wala sa Constitution yun? Nasa rules natin yun. Oh, ang rules natin promulgated natin because of the power given to us by the Constitution, but the Constitution does not specify that. Actually, we could have written na yung pumasa na ng third reading, itrato natin na third reading na rin. We could do that, but we did not do it. So policy lang po yun na reset natin as far as legislative workload is concerned. Pagdating naman sa impeachment judicial workload of the Senate as an impeachment court, I propose, or I give the interpretation that the caseload remains. Ang nagbago lang are the member judges. Just like, I think we can easily envision sa Supreme Court, nagbabago, divisions ng CA, divisions ng Sandigan Bayan, but the caseload remains. So I think we can mentally separate the two kasi Article 6 yung legislative workload, Article 11 yung impeachment workload. So that would be my response, Mr. President.
But Mr. President, would not that prevent the other part of the two-step process? Two-step process because filed by the lower house, prosecutors, received by the Senate, the trial jurors, the trial judges. Would not that prevent the other part of the two-leg process from initiating another complaint, because there is now a case pending which you say should be continuing?
If the majority leader will allow me not to respond, but,
yes, because
his question is very loaded and provides the hint of what can happen in the future.
Majority Leader?
Yes, Mr. President, our minority leader is seeking the floor for a manifestation.
The Minority Leader is recognized. You may proceed, sir.
So thank you, Mr. President, for giving me your permission to make this manifestation on the topic touched earlier by our majority leader, Mr. President. This is the issue of whether the impeachment complaint transmitted by the House of Representatives to this Senate last February 5, 2025 can cross over to the Senate of the 20th Congress. Well, Mr. President and my dear colleagues, doubts have been publicly expressed by certain personalities whether the trial of the impeachment complaint against the Vice President can continue or cross over into the 20th Congress. I wish to share and put on the record some of my thoughts on this particular issue. Article 11, Section 3, Paragraph 6 of the Philippine Constitution provides that, and I quote, "The Senate shall have the sole power to try and decide all cases of impeachment." Hence, this provision makes the Senate not just an impeachment court, but the impeachment court. An impeachment proceeding is sui generis, that is, unique or a class of its own. In Republic versus Sereno, it is described as a proceeding exercised by the legislative as representatives of the sovereign to vindicate the breach of the trust reposed by the people in the hands of the public officer by determining the public officer's fitness to stay in office. While the form, procedure, and substantive arguments in impeachments remind us of a court trial, it also has the characteristics of a political process. The decision-making process in impeachment is not governed by any fixed or binding standard of proof, allowing for broad discretion on the part of the members of the impeachment court when they make their final decision on the case. The decision makers or the members of the impeachment court can use any standard of proof they want, and this choice will not be subject to any review by any court except the court of public opinion, which is not technically a court. This fact gives the impeachment proceedings its political character. Hence, to better understand these sui generis impeachment proceedings, we need to look for analogies using well-known principles and practices in other systems which are applicable to impeachment proceedings. As to the question of whether the impeachment trial conducted by the Senate in the 19th Congress or the impeachment complaint entertained by the Senate in the 19th Congress can cross over and continue into the 20th Congress, there is no provision in the 1987 Constitution or in the Senate Rules of Procedure on impeachment trials that expressly prohibits this. On the contrary, the Senate Rules on Impeachment support the position that the impeachment trial shall continue until final judgment, even if it is necessary to continue into the next Congress. Let me read the rules. Rule number 3. Upon presentation of the articles to the Senate shall specify the date and time for the consideration of such articles. Unless the Senate provides otherwise, it shall continue in session from day to day, except Saturdays, Sundays, and non-working holidays, until final judgment shall be rendered, and so much longer as may in its judgment be necessary. There is a contrary opinion that the rules of the Senate which mandate that all pending matters and proceedings shall terminate upon the expiration of one Congress should take precedence over the cited rules on impeachment, which state that the trial shall continue until final judgment. The justification for the precedence given to the rules of the Senate is that the latter were passed by virtue of the power granted by the Constitution to the Senate to promulgate its rules. That is found in Article 6, Section 16, Paragraph 3, which provides each house may determine the rules of its proceedings. However, the Senate rules on impeachment were also passed by virtue of the power granted by the same Constitution to the Senate to promulgate its rules on impeachment. So, let us all look at Article 11, Section 3, Paragraph 8, which provides the Congress shall promulgate its rules on impeachment to effectively carry out the purpose of this section. In fact, there should be no conflict between the two rules because the rules of the Senate apply to legislative proceedings of the Senate, while the rules on impeachment apply to cases of impeachment. On this issue, the Supreme Court in the case of Pimentel Jr. versus Joint Committee of Congress ruled that the legislative functions of the 12th Congress may have come to a close upon the final adjournment of its regular sessions on June 11, 2004. But this does not affect its non-legislative functions. conducting impeachment trials is most definitely not a legislative function. In fact, the section in the Constitution which speaks of impeachment is found in Article 11 under the title Accountability of Public Officers, and not under Article 6, which is titled the Legislative Department. The conduct of impeachment trials, therefore, should not be affected by the final adjournment of the legislative session. Furthermore, we can use the analogy of the court system. Under the 1987 Constitution, the Senate is the impeachment court. The Senate in impeachment cases is more like a judicial body than a legislative one. Just like a court, the workload, caseload, or docket of the Senate as the impeachment court will not and should not be affected by a change in membership. We can see this principle in action in all our courts and electoral tribunals, where their case dockets do not change and are not reduced or reset to zero whenever there are changes in the court's membership. Likewise, it is well settled that jurisdiction once acquired is not lost but continues until the case is terminated, and hopefully terminated to its logical end. Hence, it is my humble opinion that the trial of the current impeachment case, now pending before the Senate of the 19th Congress, can cross over or continue from the 19th Congress to the 20th Congress. The impeachment docket of the Senate Impeachment Court continues and remains to be the same. So thank you very much, Mr. President, my dear colleagues, for your time and attention.
Thank you, Senator Coco Pimentel, our distinguished minority floor leader.
Although that was only a manifestation, I am willing to entertain questions. Should there be any questions, Mr. President?
Ngayon, ikaw, bilang Pilipino, ano ang masasabi mo at reaksyon sa balitang ito? Mag-iwan ka ng komento sa ibaba at atin pong babasahin isa-isa.